Desmond Oba was a man of immense wealth, power, and privilege. He had everything a person could want: sprawling estates, luxurious cars, and more money than he could ever spend. Yet, his wealth was a burden rather than a blessing. Desmond was lonely, tired of meeting women who only cared about his riches. He longed for someone who would love him for who he truly was, not for the lifestyle he could provide. Sitting in his grand mansion one night, Desmond devised a plan. He would disguise himself as a simple taxi driver. This way, no one would know who he was or how much he was worth. He wanted to see if someone could love him for the man beneath the wealth. The next day, Desmond purchased an old, worn-out taxi. It had seen better days, but it suited his plan perfectly. He dressed in simple clothing and began his new adventure, hoping to find the kind of love he had dreamed about. The sun was barely up, casting a golden glow over Los Angeles International Airport as travelers hurried to their gates. Among the bustling crowd, Walter and Grace stood out, not because of their appearance, but because of the warmth they exuded. 70-year-old Walter, wearing his favorite worn cardigan, looked every bit the doting grandfather, while Grace clung gently to his arm. They were on their way to Chicago to visit their grandson, and their excitement was palpable. Surrounded by business travelers in suits, Walter and Grace might have seemed a little out of place, but their joy was unmistakable. The boarding process went smoothly, and they soon found their seats. Walter stood up to retrieve a book from their overhead bag, hoping to enjoy a familiar story during the flight. But suddenly, Linda, a stern-faced flight attendant, stormed down the aisle, her eyes narrowed with irritation. "Sit down immediately, sir. You're disturbing the passengers," she snapped, her voice cutting through the calm atmosphere. Walter, startled, hesitated for a moment, trying to explain. But before he could get the words out, Linda's harsh tone escalated. Grace, ever composed, spoke softly. "Please, my husband just needs his book and I don't want excuses." Linda interrupted, her voice echoing down the cabin. "If you can't follow the rules, maybe you shouldn't be flying." The humiliation settled over Walter and Grace like a heavy weight, their embarrassment visible as whispers spread through the cabin. Within moments, security arrived, and Walter and Grace were led off the plane, bewildered and deeply hurt. What Linda didn't realize was that her actions would ignite a spark, a fight for dignity that would capture the attention of many. This was just the beginning of Walter and Grace's unexpected journey for justice and respect. Walter and Grace sat quietly in the airport lounge, the sting of humiliation still fresh in their minds. Grace's heart ached as she thought about how they had been treated. She knew they couldn't stay silent. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and dialed David, their son, a prominent attorney in Chicago. The moment David answered, Grace's voice was steady but tinged with pain. "David, you need to hear this," she said, recounting the ordeal with every detail of Linda's harshness and their forced removal from the plane. David listened, his frustration evident even over the phone. As Grace finished, a young woman who had been sitting nearby approached. "Excuse me," she began, her voice filled with empathy. "I recorded everything that happened. What they did to you, it wasn't right. People need to know." Grace looked at Walter, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and determination. They accepted the young woman's offer. The video was sent to David, who then forwarded it to his daughter, Emily. Emily, a journalist with a large following, knew exactly what to do. Within minutes, she posted the video with the caption, "My grandparents were mistreated by an airline today. This should never happen to anyone." The response was immediate. Within hours, the hashtag Justice for Walter and Grace began trending. The video, which captured Walter's confused yet dignified demeanor as Linda scolded him, resonated deeply with viewers. People watched as Grace calmly tried to reason with Linda, only to be dismissed and escorted out by security. Outrage grew swiftly, with local news channels picking up the story and broadcasting it across their networks. The airline, scrambling to control the growing backlash, offered Walter and Grace first-class tickets on the next available flight. But Grace, unwavering, refused. "This isn't about getting better seats," she said in an interview. "It's about treating people with dignity, no matter their age or who they are." Public support poured in from across the country. Thousands of people expressed their sympathy and anger, sharing their own stories of mistreatment. Celebrities and advocates amplified Emily's post, demanding accountability from the airline. Walter and Grace, once humiliated, were now at the forefront of a movement, a symbol of the broader fight for respect and fair treatment of all travelers, young and old alike. Their story had sparked a fire, and they were ready to see it through. David knew that what had happened to his parents could not be swept under the rug. This wasn't just about Walter and Grace. It was about ensuring that no one else faced the same kind of humiliation and injustice. With a determination that had been ingrained in him since childhood, David filed a lawsuit against the airline, accusing them of discriminatory practices and seeking accountability. He was determined to make a stand, not just for his parents, but for every vulnerable passenger who had been mistreated. The lawsuit quickly gained attention, and just days after it was filed, David received an anonymous tip from a former airline employee. The whistleblower provided crucial documents, evidence that the mistreatment of Walter and Grace was not an isolated incident. The documents painted a disturbing picture, a pattern of elderly passengers being treated poorly to make room on overbooked flights. Linda, the flight attendant, was merely a cog in a much larger machine. A machine driven by an unspoken company policy to prioritize profit over dignity. David and Emily, armed with this new evidence, took the story to the media. The response was explosive. News outlets ran with the story, and headlines blared. Airlines' pattern of discriminatory behavior revealed. Public outrage swelled as more and more people came forward to share their experiences. The airline, desperate to contain the fallout, suspended Linda and issued multiple public apologies, but the damage was already done. Walter and Grace's ordeal had become a rallying cry. It was no longer just their story. It was a movement, a demand for accountability and change. The voices of those who had been silenced were now echoing loudly, and the fight for dignity was just beginning. 1 week after the trial, Walter and Grace were surprised to receive a letter from the airline's new CEO. It contained a heartfelt apology and an invitation for them to join a new advisory board focused on improving the travel experience for elderly passengers. Walter read the letter aloud, his voice steady, and Grace listened intently. When he finished, she looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth and determination. "Let's do it," she said. "If we can make things better for others, it's worth it." With that decision, Walter and Grace embraced a new chapter in their journey. They joined the advisory board, becoming advocates for change and ensuring that future travelers, especially seniors, would be treated with the respect and care they deserved. Their courage, once born out of necessity, had now become a beacon for others, sparking real, meaningful progress. To our viewers, what would you have done in Walter and Grace's situation? Have you ever faced or witnessed something similar? We'd love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments below or send us an email. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and hope. Together, we can make a difference. Walter and Grace found themselves at the center of the courtroom, the weight of their journey culminating in this moment. Surrounded by family members, and with the unwavering support of the public, they were no longer just a couple who had faced mistreatment, they were symbols of resilience. Walter took the stand, his hands trembling slightly, but his voice was unwavering. He looked directly at the airline's representatives, his calm demeanor concealing the pain beneath. "We only wanted to visit our grandson," Walter began, his voice resonating through the silent room. "We never expected to be treated like criminals. We didn't deserve this. No one does." His words hung in the air, the truth of their simplicity hitting home with every person present. The jury watched intently, their faces a mix of empathy and indignation. David then presented the evidence, meticulously detailing the systemic mistreatment that had plagued the airline for years. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric with tension, the airline's lawyers visibly struggling to defend what was now indefensible. The images of Walter and Grace being escorted off the plane, coupled with the damning internal documents, painted a picture that could not be ignored. The jury took little time to deliberate. Their verdict was clear. Walter and Grace had won. The airline was ordered to compensate them and, more importantly, to implement significant changes to prevent such incidents from happening again. Mandatory sensitivity training would be required for all employees, and special protections for elderly passengers were put in place. As Walter and Grace hugged their family, a wave of relief and quiet triumph washed over them. Their victory was not just for themselves. It was for everyone who had been silenced, and for everyone who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. It was a step toward a fairer world.